Welcome, everyone, to Hello, Ernest at the Kitchen Table, connecting writers and readers. I am Jan Pratt, the author of several children's picture books and also the author of a series of yoga lesson plans for kids.
And I am Gaga Gabarty. I'm a co-author with Judy Lee Butler. Together, we write the Phoebe Cornell Mystery Series. Join us for every episode as we connect readers to your next great read.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jan Pratt. I'm here with Hello, Ernest, around the kitchen table, connecting writers and readers. And our author today is Curtis. Oh, Curtis, you just told me how to say it. Yost. Curtis Yost. And I'm going to let him introduce himself. He is quite the author. He has several books that are out there and a couple series. So Curtis, go ahead and tell us about your genre and a little bit about what you've written in the past and where you are now.
I'm the author of the American Isekai series. There's several books that were prior to the one that we're going to end up discussing and what I'm working on right now. There was the Third Gate, Sainted Monster, and Prey and Predator, and I referred to those as my introduction books. The first one kind of just slowly works you into the world. The second, Sainted Monster, is kind of the darker side of the world itself. And then Prey and Predator was based on the characters and kind of evolved where the story goes and kind of opened the world up to almost like a Dune type setting towards the end. Each one has a different narrator in its place. So the first one's Michael, the second one's Payne, the third one is Isabella. And then after those introductions are put in, then I started creating Controlled Freak. And it's a whole different set, but it's the same rules. And so it's almost a prequel sequel that happens. So after what happens at the end of Prey and Predator, which I'm not going to tell you, you get to learn about Matilda. And, it starts off, the concept of an isekai is other worlds. So the individuals in the world die, get sent to a place outside our world, almost a purgatory called the Void. And they have three options, each one chosen by God himself. There's Heaven's Gate, Hell's Gate, and the Third Gate. And that Third Gate enters them into a world in which basically Lucifer Morningstar lives. And he's got 5 generals in there, and he controls the world itself. But he does it kind of from a sideline, so he kind of interferes with high-ranking individuals, and it's almost like a plague that humanity is itself. A lot of metaphors, a lot of stuff in there that's very mature, because if the devil's running the world, are you really going to be cutesy? So, and the whole thing is dark fantasy, kind of a mix between superhero and Dungeons and Dragons, and that type of thing. So it's truly unique in a way that I wasn't actually sure how to market it properly without stepping on different areas and being like, well, this book doesn't sound like that. Well, this one does, so they're all very unique.
And which one are you working on now?
So there's Controlled Freak. I have the Living Edition, and there is Devil's Island Edition, which actually contains part 1 and 2 for the Living Edition, part 3 and 4 for the Devil's Island Edition, and then I'm working on a book which it's technically 5 and 6, but I decided to put both of them together because without the ending of 5, without 6, 5 just didn't seem like it was enough. And I'm always trying to give more bang for your buck type of mindset in my head. So as of right now, it's like 450 pages. I've been editing it over and over again, trying to make sure it's like the best I can possibly do. And it should be released this summer.
Nice. So if people are interested in this genre and you have quite the collection, do they need to start with the prequels? Can they jump in at any point? What's your recommendation for best reading experience?
So you start off with the first one, which it's basically a bunch of short stories thrown into it to try to I try to blend it all together, but it's more of a descriptor so you understand what's going on. In fact, I went the old style of a lit RPG style and pull numbers in that, but it's the only book I throw numbers in. And the reason for that is so that people understood there's a leveling process, there's a power scale that's going on here. And so they have to fight and they have to build and they have to experience in order to get strong enough to defeat the devil himself. So there is that going on, but then you get to part two, you start to discover different things, and you can read all of them. It doesn't have to be in order, except for when I have the controlled freak set, you have to start from one and work your way up. But the other three books, the introductions, you don't have to put them in any order, but you may end up spoiling something if you decide to go back and read something because they're all found around the same time period. And the only thing that changes is actually the end of the books. So
now we had a conversation ahead of time, and one of the issues that came up that you're kind of battling with, that I picked up, was that there's a very mature theme in many of your books. So what age range would you think this is appropriate for? Sometimes that can help readers target in.
I tell people mature. And the reason I tell you mature is a 14-year-old I've seen be more mature than a 22-year-old. But I usually put the age range at least 18. There are very mature situations. There's language. There's some sexual assault that occurs, and it's not meant for people that I would never put it in a school library if that's the question. And you got to figure out where your balance is, and I would guess probably more college student might appreciate it. But my number one base seems to be actually between 28 and 42.
Okay.
That end up I have everything on audiobook all the way up to part 3. And part 4 is supposed to be coming out. I have a person who's doing the entire Controlled Freak audiobooks, and it's the wonderful Megan Duran. She's working on it as we speak, and I freaking love having her do it because she kind of understands it and she loves the material. Like when I read her talking about it, she's just kind of like, oh, this book is awesome. Like she read the last one, she's like, I love the fantasy of this. This is awesome. Like she didn't know what to really say, but she's like, it's really fun to do. And so I have to find a balance between everything because I have this weird way of starting things off slow, like really deathly slow. So when people are reading the book, they're like, I don't know where I'm going with this. And then eventually towards the end, you're just like, holy crap. Like, and then you look forward to the next one. But it always starts off real slow, except for part 4, because it was just a constant continuation of part 3. So at the end, I'm not telling you the end of part 3, but but when you're doing that, and then you get to the very end, and then you're just like the end of part 4, you're like, that's freaking sadistic, and I love doing that to people. It's and I get some of the strangest responses from people I've ever seen, because I have an email, Curtis Yost Mail at gmail.com. I opened it up, and there's actually only one book where I actually put the email into, which I thought was just like, it's at the very end. So you have to finish the book to actually find the email. And it was kind of funny. So I get these random responses from fans, and some of them are very callous and mean spirited, and some of them are just like, this is when is the next one, And so you got to find your nice little balance and go from there. But there is an understanding that it is very dark, and it is going to be hard to get through some of the scenes because of how dark I end up going with it. But reality is sometimes hard to deal with, and so I actually divide up the chapter, so if you go read it a second time and you know it's that chapter, you can actually skip it.
Right, right. Well, good to know. Good to know for our audience. So with this detailed of a series, it seems like you must have some tips and tricks for developing your characters. How do you outline them? Do you have a sketchbook for each one of them? What's your method for coming up with these characters and keeping them all straight?
Um, so yes, on the do I have a sketchbook on the names of them? I my sketchbook is basically a description, and that's it. Because each character is based on people I actually know, or a mixture of people that I know, and so that's where they kind of come to life a little bit. And one of my favorite things to do is actually breaking the fourth wall with I call it campfire tales. Um, the reason is it's a bit like you're sitting around a campfire and they're talking to you, and so all of a sudden you're reading the book, and then I break the fourth wall out of nowhere, and you're just like, oh, like what? Um, some people like it, some people don't. They're just like, well, it kind of takes me out of the book a little bit, and I'm like, well, that's the way I chose to write it. And so it's like I'm personally talking to you as a man or a woman, or as I said, the one I'm currently doing is a woman, and she says some things, and some of the emotions and stuff that happen are actually things my daughters have said to me, and my wife has said to me, and I just find it to be so funny. And one of the scenes was actually they got done watching the Barbie movie, and so in the third book, there's actually a thing where my daughters actually said some of the stuff, and I threw it in the book because I thought it was hilarious um, that they would do that to their poor dad. But yeah, that's how you base it upon. You got to base it upon actual people, otherwise it's going to appear fake. I mean, even if it's a werewolf or a vampire or something, you have to give it a personality based on what you know, and that's part of who you are. uh, when people are reading, they can sense a phony from a mile away. If you're trying to create a character, if you're trying to create a scene and you have no knowledge of that type of personality or that scene, they can smell it a mile away and they will DNF your book real quick.
So, are your books traditionally published or are they self-published? What's your recommendation for an aspiring author?
Well, here's the thing. So a lot of people get frustrated because they write that one powerful book and they'll spend 2 years, 3 years working on a book. And so they go to the traditional publisher and that, and they, um, as far as things go, I think if you want to try to do traditional publishing, go for it. They'll pay for your sponsor. They actually want to make money off your book. So they pay you a certain amount and they want to make money off that book. And they want to make, do thousands. That's the goal. Just never do vanity publishing, which is basically a bunch of fraudsters that will take $5,000 from you and do what you can do with self-publishing. But I personally am self-publishing because the traditional authors wanted to, or traditional publishers wanted me as an author to change half my book. Like I went in there and they slaughtered my book, and I'm like, I can't do this. Like it's just a matter of whether you want money over integrity. Traditional is where you'll probably make a little more money, but self-publishing is where you'll be able to keep your artistic integrity intact.
But when you self-publish, then the marketing's on your plate, right?
It's on my plate, 100%. I do the best I can. I do TikTok. I do Facebook. You'll actually see, like, to meet up with other authors and try to connect with other authors. You just look up the word author, and we're all putting it in our names. It's like, Curtis Yost author is what my Facebook is. And so you'll find all these different people, and it's a giant blend. And what I find is like 90% of them are romance novels that people are writing. And so it's just like, oh, okay, so sometimes I wonder if there's real value in it with talking to some of them, but the value comes at you learn different things on how to promote and how and then there's support groups, there's writers helping writers. There's supporting writers groups. Uh, Facebook is filled with things, and they will help guide you and prevent you from making serious mistakes that I personally made at the beginning. And I wish I had these groups. So, whenever I'm in these groups and I see somebody saying something and they're like, oh, is this person, they're telling me to pay money. You never pay anybody money for anything unless it's like your editor. And there has to be a feeling of trust. Don't trust people on the internet because if you're on Facebook, like 99.9% of those people trying to contact you are scam artists. And it's a brutal field where you just have to constantly say no. And so I think finding an individual to do these things for you, you have to do it in person. Because I made the mistake of trying to find an editor on Fiverr for my first 3 books, and they slaughtered my books enough that I ended up having to refix them the best I could. They ripped out stuff, and because I said I need to get this down to 500 pages because they were originally 1,400 pages, and they're like, nobody's ever going to read a 1,400-page book. So I said, all right. So I said I need some help with the editing in that, and they ripped out so much that it became incoherent and ran through AI software and that, and I ended up getting really upset. And so I had to go in there and try to fix it the best I could, and which led to so many drafts. I think I ended up with because after my first draft, I gave it to him, and then I had 14 drafts after each of those, just trying to make sure everything was where it needed to be. So it was almost like I had to rewrite the whole book. So just don't get scammed. Don't trust anybody you don't personally know, and try to go from there. It's because it's a lot of these people are like Saudi princes. You don't give them the money, you'll never see it again. So that's
So
the
just
best
be
advice I can
cautious
give.
in that process of finding editors and support groups.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
have
It's
a do you have an in-person support group?
what happened was I ended up doing a bunch of classes to try to do everything myself. And
Mm-hmm.
so everything's put on me, which is why the editing is taking so dang long for this next book. Because I want to make sure everything's perfect, everything's down to this point. Does this word need it? And so I'll spend probably about per paragraph 10 minutes. And when the book is probably about 120,000 words, it takes a long time to go through each paragraph. And so, but you have to make sure it makes sense, the words work, and you read over it over and over again. It's an aggravating process because it's like watching a movie 14 times and then just kind of pausing, rewinding certain spots in it over and over again. And so it the worst part for me is the editing. Because you're also realizing you're going to have to rip out pieces. It's like, no, it's my baby. Uh, but you realize this has to be done. Last week I ripped out 32 pages because I thought, and it was towards the end of the book, and it just aggravated me to rip it out because it was such a good piece of storyline to go with it. But it just led to it would feel like bloat. Like it felt like this whole story, because what happens, I'm not going to tell you what happens, but something happens to the guy right after, and so you're just kind of like, well, since this happened, I mean, was it really necessary to write a 32 pages about his backstory before I did it? And the point is I put it in there so that people had heart for this guy and feel bad for him right before I did what I do to him. And then I realized, oh, I'm gonna have to remove this. And it was like 2 chapters that I removed from it, and what are you gonna do? And so sometimes when you're dealing with stuff, you do have to remove to keep up with pacing and to get to the end. But otherwise, it's just people are gonna sit there and accuse you of filler, pretty much,
Right.
and you don't want to do that.
Yeah, you don't want your reader to be bored because of this extra content, right? You want to keep the pace going. So yeah, I agree that the editing can be so painful, but also you want a product that you are personally proud of, but that readers enjoy. So necessary, right?
It's a necessary evil that makes you want to cry some nights. And I'm not a crier, but there's been moments where I'm just like, so.
So in your stories, what's your purpose for writing? Is it just entertainment? Do you have messages or themes throughout these different books? What's your
A
planning?
little bit of everything. So the first books all the way up to the last one, because I didn't bother count with this new one in case I decide to get rid of it. 37 song lyrics you can find in them. So there's like little games in them too. There's a lot of metaphors within it that you can figure out. Each character has severe mental illnesses, but they're talking to you, so they try to appear normal. But then you're just sitting there like they just did that, Um, the first one, Michael, if you look at his personality in that, he seems so happy and joyful in that throughout the book, but he shows a lot of symptoms of severe depression and in that. In fact, there's a scene in the book where he just kind of drops, and there's an explanation for it, fantasy wise, but it was like he just can't move, he can't help as everything terrible is going on around him. And then the second one, I actually compare, I've been sober since 2004. And so there's comparisons to kind of drug use. Um, so I don't want to explain his character too much on why that is, but he pretty much has a superpower of healing himself. Um, and so to be able to feel anything, to feel good at all, because of all the horrible things that happened to him while he was a child, he kind of gets these good memories of his first life, and so he ends up stabbing himself repeatedly in the chest, hoping to gain some semblance. Yeah, it's not a lighthearted story. His whole story is just like really messed up. It's also my book that's banned in Idaho, or a bookstore in Idaho, for good reason. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend, but it gets really dark real quick, and there's just some absurd stuff. I tried to throw some humor in there, but it's dark enough to make people squeamish. Um, but yeah, you got these characters, and they're all kind of mentally deranged, and they're based on people's real mental illnesses that I have met in my life. Um, and I won't tell you how I know all these mentally ill people, but and it wasn't because I'm mentally ill, but I just know a bunch of people that had some real problems and how they dealt with it. And so you got to sit down and be like, okay, am I like this person? And you might actually find yourself relating to that individual because you know somebody like that, or you are somebody like that. And so that's where it really might hit hard.
So in your journey, what do you think? I know you made one comment in another conversation that life is stranger than fiction. So, and I know you incorporate a lot of your personal experiences kind of in some of your books. As a author, what would your recommendation be? I mean, can you fantasize a real event and have it still be significant?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you got the basis of things down. I have moments in my books I called acid trip moments, where it's very vibrant and colorful, and you know, you kind of have to read to understand. But it's like it's almost sadistic, but very colorful at the same time. And obviously, we're not living on another plane of existence. There's no real magic where people are shooting fireballs and stuff. So you do have to create a realm, um, but there has to be a certain basis of reality as well. Otherwise, people get completely detached. People are going to be like, "Wait, why would somebody do this? This is absurd." And so you have to give a character purpose behind anything that they do. As long as there's purpose, people will believe just about anything because this is a world of escapism.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just me sitting there creating metaphors, and because if I was going to do that, I'd just write a book on people that are mentally ill. It's
Exactly.
but you got to have a certain level of escapism, and the escapism is the part that people really need, especially in this day and age where how do I put this? I'm not a big fan of Hollywood anymore. Like I remember growing up and loving the movies, but there's just a certain level where they've forgotten what the human emotion is, and they're more into their own personal messaging than they are about what a person is and who they are. And so that's partially why I started writing again, like to publish,
Mm-hmm.
because I started writing to publish about 3.5 years ago,
Okay.
3.5, 4 years ago. And the main reason for that was I'm like, this is terrible. This is that they forgot how to write, and people really need something to fall back on. They need to find something to read and understand and find value in, because these TV shows are awful. I find myself watching shows from the 90s still, and refusing to watch the new stuff because there's no like real comedy. There's nothing really funny anymore. And I think as a writer, you should look at your life and the things around it, the things that make you laugh and the things that make you cry and the things that bring out your personality, and put that into the book and have people read that part of the book and relate to you as a person. And that's, sometimes people will not agree with me, but that's just the nature of humanity. You're never going to agree with your neighbor. You're just going to smile and hope for the best. So,
Well, every author will find their tribe, is my philosophy. We write. You obviously have a passion for your characters and your subject matter, and I think people will find you when they know what that is, like what your passion is. So thanks for sharing that. All right. So do you have a little brief bit that you could read us from one of your books? Tell us what the book is first, and then where it is in your series, and then you can go ahead and just maybe read us a few minutes.
yeah, this is it's just the very beginning of Controlled Freak, part one in the series. This is when she's still alive and very, very much so young, about the age of 3. So um, my story is not an easy one to tell. People refer to me as many evil names throughout my life. The main one that my sister in the second world referred to me was a cunt. My own adopted brother referred to me as this right before he stabbed me in the face. What a prick. My name is Jamie McAllister. I have red hair and green eyes. My best friends growing up used to say that I had the cutest freckles he had ever seen. I do believe he loved me, but it was hard for me to reciprocate the same emotions. The best way to start my story is to describe where I came from. My mother was a beautiful red-haired woman. She had green eyes just like me, but all her freckles were on her arms. She was a little over 5 feet tall and always had a cigarette in her hand. My father was almost 6 feet tall. He had black hair and brown eyes. The man was always wearing jeans and a wife beater shirt. He didn't change his shirt much, and the ones he wore were dirty. My father was always in the apartment. He made his money in the apartment. People were always coming to his door or getting drugs off of him. The vast majority just wanted to get high off of weed, but some wanted the harder stuff. The worst problem we had in the house was the tweakers. The tweakers were people that would destroy the hallways. If they didn't get their fix, they would do things like shit in the hallways and punch things until the cops showed up. My father was a prominent drug dealer in the area. Everyone knew to go to him for the good stuff. I guess you are going to do something about that spat on your face of society. You better have a good product to make it worth people's time. I'm sorry, my throat's low. I was 3 years old and was told not to ever answer the door for anybody. I never did answer the door. I saw the dangers of doing so in the form of tweakers. I was 2 when I saw the first man get shot in our living room for the first time. The loud noises from the gunfire had me running to the kitchen. My father had a group of people he would call the cleaners show up whenever someone died in the apartment. These men in white suits would come in and get rid of every speck of blood. My father was merciless when he killed people. I witnessed men with their limbs cut off. I would be told to stay in my room while the cleaners were coming. I watched as the men's lives slowly breathed their last breaths. As a 3-year-old girl, I had no idea what was going on. Later in life, I was told that those murderers bathed me in their blood. I was baptized in blood. True effects of what happened didn't hit me until I formed the first group of serial killers in New York. I'll explain that later. I would spend most days in a white shirt and white underwear. Most of these times, I didn't get a bath or have my clothes changed for a few days at a time. I look like my dad in that way. My messy habits made me blend in as a member of the family. I ate cheesy crackers all day while watching cartoons. My teeth were still coming in. I looked a little goofy. I had 2 teeth that still needed to come in. My tooth, or right to my large front teeth, was missing. I would take the crackers and slide them back and forth to soften them up. The cheese would be completely sucked off before I would swallow. My favorite cartoon was either My Little Donkey or Lord of the Universe. They both had magic involved. My Little Donkey was about a group of donkeys that lived in a fairy tale land called Calypso. They would fight with the power of love and save the kingdom and win every time. As an adult, I understood that this was the stupidest fucking thing in the world. But to a child, this was a great escape from reality. Is that enough?
Yeah, I think that gives everybody a kind of a feel for your character. And that was the very first book, correct?
This is the very first book. I'm sorry I butchered some of it up trying to. I need some water from talking so much, but
That,
yeah.
that's okay. So one
It,
more question for you. Where do you
yeah,
hope to be with your series in 5 years or with your writing experience?
halfway done with the series. I that's pretty much it. It's I have what's probably going to take over 10 years already planned out, and so as I'm going through, and I know how it's going to end. I know how it began. I just you have to figure out what's going on between them. And so I actually have a book that does this one here. The next series set is actually going to be called Born in Blood. And then the next one's going to be called Evolution, which that I could change that at a moment's notice. I'm not set on that name, but I know exactly what the book is. So I'm kind of going from there. And then I won't tell you the one after that because that's when I stop introducing main characters and I start really diving into the story and where it's going to go from there. And I'm just going to say somebody's going to die. You just won't know who. And yeah, so by doing that, I feel like you got involved with one of the characters, and when I kill them off, it's going to come as a shock, and people are going to know what's going to happen next, and that's when we're going to really dive in and see how far the universe goes before we end up trying to kill the devil himself. But I have most of that book set planned out and on paper. It's just a matter of writing it out and seeing where I go with it. But it is actually really the stuff that goes on is really cool. And I'm also going to do during the editing process of the first book, I had to eliminate the backstory, a lot of the backstory from the first character. It was over 500 pages, and so I kind of dumbed it down to just like the end of his life. And so I'm going to hopefully go back because one of the things is nobody knew that anybody was going to die for the isekai. And so we took that out, and then I said I can just do this later, and so I'm going to actually rewrite the story so that people can actually feel and understand. And the mystery is now going to be is gone after the third book on who he is, and after this book here, you'll learn a heck of a lot more about Michael, because his involvement is like from the first world actually blends them into the second world as well, and they're all connected in one way or another. And so the idea is that God puts you right where he wants you when he wants you to. And so that kind of that's where you start to see things, and humans are corruptible, so you're going to see a lot of corruption within the people themselves because they're very flawed. That's one of the biggest things I want to do is make very flawed individuals and have people see that and be like, holy crap. you know so
So, where can people find your books? Where's the best place for them to look for you?
well, I just did a book signing at Barnes and Noble. So if you want to, you can go in there and order the books from them. So you can get it that way. Amazon, I have it on Amazon. The Devil's Island edition is actually only for bookstores at the moment, but eventually I'm gonna do that so that you can have 3 and 4 at the same time. But I'm hoping to actually set it up for Amazon soon, because then with the audiobooks, I can put part 3 and 4 into one audiobook set so that people can listen to it all in one shot. And that's one thing I do is like, instead of a 7-8 hour story, you're going to get a 14-hour story, or and more likely to drop a coin or a token and get more out of it. So I make the agreement with my narrators to be able to do this, so they keep all their footage and save it until the second book comes, and then the next one's just going to be huge. It's already going to be like 2 books, so you're going to have more of the story, and the next one, it's just ongoing.
Do you have any social media outlets where you're posting information? So if people want to follow you, is that an option also?
Yeah, I do TikTok. It's at Real Curtis Yost, and I just kind of do advertisements and stuff. I hold back until I'm ready to produce something out. And the last thing was just me going summer 2024 is the next book. And so now I was dumb enough to give myself a deadline before I finished. And so I'm trying to go over the book for summer and make sure it comes out at an appropriate time, and then get started on the next one. It's an ongoing process. You can't stop, because as much as I'm going to write about in this book series, I'm hoping to do it before I die. And I'm just like, if I do one a year, I'll never reach that point. So it's you
Got to
gotta
crank them out a
push.
little
You gotta
faster, huh?
crank them out a little faster, give people what they need from you, and hope for the best. And so, you know, and the worst part is sometimes is you don't get the support from family while you're doing it, because, in fact, my wife looked at the one cover and goes, "Yeah, we need to cover up that cover." The girls don't need to be seeing that. So you just kind of have to figure out where that balance is, and try to find support. And when you don't have the support, find that driving force to go forward and continue with what you're doing.
Well, Curtis, thanks for being on Hello Ernest today. I will put all your contact information in the show notes so people can find you, and good luck with all your endeavors. You've got quite the process going here, and I'm sure people are going to look forward to your next couple of books.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this informal conversation with today's author.
Join us next time as we connect writers and readers around the kitchen table.